up and running. Hi, everyone. I am pulling up Twitch on my phone just so we can have a chat going. And we are live. All right. So we got one more person joining us here tonight. We're just going to get started without them, just our introduction. So welcome to the new math teacher debrief. Today, some fresh-faced teachers from Suny Potsdam are going to discuss the highs and lows of teaching math in New York State public schools. From curriculum hurdles to classroom triumphs, we are sharing it all here today. So I am Stevie Nellenbeck. I am a second-year teacher of middle school math, and here today I have Sean with me. If you want to introduce yourself, Sean.
Yeah, hi guys. I'm Sean Sievers. I'm also a second-year teacher. I teach the high school level, so I have experience teaching Algebra 1, geometry, and business math currently.
Awesome. And when Allison is able to join, Allison's going to be joining, and she's going to give a bit of a perspective from geometry that she teaches. That's like her main focus there. But we all went to school together. We went through the secondary math education at Suny Potsdam, and we learned a lot together along the way the last few years. And it's interesting how we have different perspectives in different parts of New York. So I think it's fun.
Yeah. One of the things that I really appreciate the fact that, like, you know, we did undergrad together, and now we're together in the same program for our master's, which is educational technology specialists. So it's really great to just like see the growth that we've both experienced from. I think it was sophomore year that when we met, up until this point where now we're finishing up our second year teaching. The amount of experiences that we've had is just I couldn't have even imagined that this would have happened.
I know. I'm thinking back to the first class we had together. It was that tech class with Brower. And we were meeting for the first time, and here to think it's probably, 4 years later now? 5.
4 or 5 years, yeah.
Time flies. Doesn't stop
for any. Pre-pandemic.
Was that?
I think it was pre-pandemic.
Yeah, it was. Because we went through the pandemic together.
Yes.
Through online yep.
Student. Yep.
Crazy. And now we're thrown in teaching knuckleheads. I call my kiddos knuckleheads all the time. I tell them, if I'm not picking on you, I don't care about you. So that's what I go with. That's our relationship, though.
My students and I, we like little playful banter.
Yes, you need that because that is what makes you that relatable.
Yeah, and I think with the thing with Gen Z is that they're very sassy, they're very sarcastic. So I feel like if you kind of like meet them on their level, then they feel more of a connection with you and they're more willing to learn from you.
Absolutely. And if you connect with them, you're not just that higher up who's like pointing the finger, telling them what to do.
Right. They can see that you have a fun side to you.
Yeah, and I think that's important. All right, well, I know Allison's going to join at some point. She told me, she's like, I just don't want you worrying that she's not leaving me hanging. But I just want to go through the topics that I have planned out for today. So first and foremost, math standards versus time. I think that's the biggest chunk of where we are. Mastery learning approach. Ways to incorporate math relevance in the classroom, technology used or encouraged in the classroom, and then we'll just close it up from there. I think there's plenty there that we can talk about and debrief through. So my first question is, what Do you think that you have enough time in the year to get through all the standards for your class, for the classes that you teach?
So this year in particular is a little bit more challenging, especially for Algebra 1, because we're transitioning into the next generation standards right now. So every time that there is, or every class or course that introduces the next generation Regents exam, their test is earlier in June than typically. So usually it's the end of, or middle to the end of June, and this year I believe it's June 4th. I believe it's the first week of June. So we lose like a good week and a half to 2 weeks of time, which is kind of stressful because from my experience last year when the Regents exam was at the normal time at the end of the year, I had to rush through the last unit, which is data and statistics, and I feel like I didn't really have an opportunity to really make sure that my students knew that content before going into the exam, just because I needed time to review as well, because there's topics from September and October that they may not have seen since then that they need refreshers on. So I have to build in some time to review some of those older topics, and with that, it really creates a time constraint. So this year in particular, I am worried about not being able to finish. Like as of right now, so my school gave us back 2 of our unused snow days on a Memorial Day break. But before they did that, I only had, I think it was 2 or 3 days built in for review, and that was only getting through about half of the last unit. So now we have 2 days that we're gonna not be in school again. So that's out of my my block scheduling cycle rotation. That's like a whole class period that I'm losing now. So it's very challenging. What's your experience with that at the middle school level?
So, middle school, we don't have regencies, but we have those state test exams. And this is what I hate about state test exams, because my state tests are in middle of May. And
Right.
so that is like a month and a half, almost 2 months of school time that is not accounted for. So my kids, I tell them straight up, we're not getting through everything. And I tell them it's not you, it's not me, it's the way it is, and we're going to try our best to hit as much as we can and prep as much as we can. So they're straight up, I think, 2 units that I'm not going to get to before our state test. And that's with my 7th and my 8th graders. Luckily, I have, at the middle school level, an extra time with them. So we have AIS. And I am able to do a little bit more prep with them in those periods. But if you think about it, my 45-minute period or my 2 45-minute periods is kind of like just one of your block schedules.
Right, yeah.
So I might be like, oh, I get 2 periods with them today, but compared to you, that's
really,
1 period.
To me, it's really like the same amount of time that I see them daily, or every other day, I guess.
So it's just different from that school to school in that sense. But
last year, actually, so I was at different districts last year because I was doing a long-term subdivision, and we also had block scheduling there, but my algebra class was with support class. So I saw them 3 out of the 4 days. And even with that 3rd day, I felt like I was pressed for time. Because I would continue to teach, and I was able to space things out a little bit more. So if there was a topic like, say, factoring, that students typically need more time with, I could spend a little bit extra time focusing on that and practicing. But it seemed like having a lot, or that extra period of time would make it as if I could actually get through the entire curriculum. But somehow I still only got through half of the last unit before I had to start reviewing. And now I'm back to down to 2 out of the 4 days. So I don't know, I haven't done, and obviously with the Regents exam being the first week of June instead of the 3rd week, I don't know. It's I guess we'll see how far I get. I just finished up the factoring unit, or I'm going to be finishing up the factoring unit when I get back. And I'm already worried about having to take some extra time to reteach some things before I assess them. And just, I mean, I would lose more time, like that's constantly a thing that we're talking to our administration about, is making sure that we have enough time to get through the curriculum that's going to be assessed on the Regents exam.
Yeah, and I think this, even since we were in school ourselves, I think we've always been on a time crunch for curriculum. Like, okay, guys,
Yep.
let's get through this. We got to get through this. And now that I'm a teacher, I find myself saying the same thing. And it creates this unnecessary pressure for ourselves and for the students. Like,
right. Because if they see a question on the exam that they're like, I've never seen this before, they're gonna think like that could be bad to their confidence. They're like, oh my God, should I have known this, or should I like remember this from something? When in reality, it's just that like that may be a question that we didn't get to, and like that's, again, like you said, that's not necessarily our fault. These are the cards that we have been dealt, and we're making the best of a bad situation, I guess. Not having enough time.
Talking about standards and time, do you think that you are reteaching a lot of material that was before there?
Yeah.
Like, so if they're in algebra, you're teaching pre-algebra 8th grade. Like, do you?
Yes. Yeah.
And
So
that's
like for
the other thing. Like, we don't have the time.
First week of school.
To
right. The first week of school, I was teaching them things that they should have learned in 7th and 8th grade, when I had a plan from the get-go before school started that I was going to start Unit 1 on the second day of school, after all of the little housekeeping things that you do on the syllabus day. And I found that I had to literally just like reteach some things and create new materials from standards from 7th and 8th grade, because they may not have gotten to it, because middle school teachers in my district in particular are probably under the same kind of stress that the high school teachers are, where like each year there's a unit or two that's just not taught. So when you move on to the next year and those 2 units kind of come back, you're like, oh wait, I never taught this, or I never learned this. And then you have 2 more units in the next year that don't get taught. And then that on top, like all piling on top of each other, by the time they get to the high school, with me, they have so many learning gaps that it creates a really big boundary to kind of fill those gaps, Hi, Allison.
Hey. Are we on the live stream thing?
We are live streaming.
Okay.
So we actually started, but if you want to introduce yourself real quick, you're just who you are, what you teach, how long you've been teaching, what you're getting your master's in.
Yeah, so I'm Allison. I went to college with Stevie and Sean. I am a second-year high school math teacher. I mostly teach geometry, but I also teach college algebra, and I'm currently almost done with my master's in curriculum and instruction.
Awesome, thank you. So what Sean and I got talking about was math standards versus time, and talking about not having enough time in that school year to get through everything that we gotta get through that's gonna be on that either Regents exam for you guys at the high school level, or state test for me, which actually happens in May compared to those Regents exams. Do you want to share some thoughts on that, Allison?
Yeah, there's way too much time. And I heard Sean, you talking about gaps. There's so much gaps in like education. Like, so, I mean, you wouldn't think this would be a big deal, but I mean, there is a lot of like setting up equations, and, there is a specific unit in geometry, like where it talks about equations of lines, equations of perpendicular and parallel lines, slope, like distance formula, midpoint formula. And the amount of kids who struggle with getting like an equation, so in standard form, into y equals mx plus c form blows my mind. Even like after they've gone through algebra, after they did all the stuff, like supposed to pass algebra, they still struggle with it so much. So getting those basic concepts and skills and drilling that hard, but also trying to get through everything we need to get through, that's tough. And I like me and my other geometry teacher that I work with, who also teaches geometry, we're starting to feel it now. Like we kind of like had to like be like, okay, like we need to like get going if we want to like, be done. We still have 2 more units left, big units left. So we kind of need to get ourselves rolling to be done by like Memorial Day to still have time to like review and stuff for the Regents. So yeah, I'm definitely feeling it right now.
I had a similar experience to Allison with teaching geometry last year, especially when there was problems that that had some algebra skills with say you had to factor something, right? To find the distance of between 2 points, and you had to find that one of the distances was negative and one was positive, so you have to get rid of the negative one. Getting through concepts like that was very difficult because they didn't remember anything about factoring. So I almost had to take an entire class period to reteach all of the methods of factoring, just for them to the next class be like, I don't know how to do this again. This kind of goes back to what Stevie and I were talking about before you joined in, about how like each year there's like little gaps that just like never get filled. So the more like the further you progress throughout high school, the larger the gap gets and the harder it is to fill it in.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
And I think this goes along with pushing kids on or holding them back. And I don't know how that situation is at your guys' school, but we are very encouraging to get them to the next level, socially and emotionally. And I'm trying to advocate to my admin, like, hey, we really can't push this kid onto pre-algebra if they cannot do orders of operations in 7th grade. Like,
right.
I don't know where that comes into play, but that, I think, leads us very well into our next topic, which is the mastery learning approach. And Sean and I, we've actually seen this quite a bit in our class. We talk about it in our grad class. I don't know about you, Allison, but it's the idea that the kid doesn't move on through grade levels. They move on through the content that they master. So we got to master number systems. Like, you got to be able to know how the positive and negatives work before we can start doing order of operations, before we can move into solving for X and going backwards. This is something I would love for our state to push into. It's something I don't see our public schools going into anytime soon. But if you guys have any thoughts on that, or anybody who's in the chat, we do have a couple viewers. If you want to throw some ideas about mastery learning approach, or anything you've heard about it, thoughts on it, ideas, feelings, anything like that.
Like, I think that this goes back to the amount of standards we have, and just like, and like the lack of time. I mean, as like great as that sounds, and like, sure, like at some point, but like, sure, like we would love for every single kid to like be like so fantastic at like, adding positive and or whatever positive, and adding positive and negative numbers before they go into like order of operations, or like whatever you just said. However, like, it's also hard too, because like you have like a group of 10 kids, let's say 8 out of 2 of them, they get it really well, but the 2 can't seem to like fully grasp the concept. So what do you do then? Do you stay on that for another week until those 2 kids or do you like go on? Like, I don't know. Like, I feel like yes, it's important for like to master it. Yes. However, A, we can't stay on a topic forever. B, because the lack of time. But then like, what do you do with the kids who do get it? Like, you kind of have to move on for them. Like, I don't know. So there's just that balance of like,
So
Yeah.
there's something that my math department does that I just saw for the first time this year that I'm really enjoying. It's called standard-based grading. So for each unit that we do, there's like 3 or 4 standards that we're really assessing them on. So every time that they take the assessment and I grade the assessment, they'll get a little half sheet of paper that has each of the standards listed, along with what question numbers are correlated with that standard and the amount of points that standard was worth. So they'll get their raw score for each standard individually, and then once the scores are released, then they have the opportunity to we call it review and reassess. So they review the topics. They do a practice worksheet that looks very, very similar to the reassessment. I grade that and to see if there's some improvement. If there is improvement, then great, they're ready to move on to the reassessment. But if there's no improvement, or they may have lost or only scored 2 points instead of 3, whatever they may have scored, then I know that I need to spend more time with them before they do the reassessment. So that's kind of our way of taking this, obviously we have our standards that we get through unit to unit teaching, and the mastery style learning, and kind of embedding that into what we're doing. So that way it kind of alleviates the issue that Allison, you brought up with, you have some students who, who got it the first time, but you still have the 2 or 3 who are still behind. If doing it this way, it kind of, the only downfall is that the students have to come in on their own time. So either doing what we call WIN, which is what I need. So it's just a period that they come in for 30 minutes. They can do whatever they have to do, or after school time, finding it a lunchtime that lines up. That's the only downfall, but with that, you can still move forward in your class without worrying about little Johnny not understanding the thing from the previous unit, because you're still working with them outside of the class or regular class time, but they're still moving ahead with the curriculum.
That's awesome. Does it feel like it's working?
Yes and no. The only reason why I say no is just because I'm still so new to this. So there's a lot of things that I'm learning as I go. For example, when I keep my data, what I was doing before is that each time that they would reassess, I would delete their old grade and just put in their new grade. And I wish that I from the get-go just saw both of the scores side by side so I can compare them. Also, I always did overall score versus each individual standard. So I think I would be better off doing each individual standard. So there's things that I'm learning along the way, but I feel overall it's a good way to kind of push those students in that mastery direction and kind of fill in those gaps with some of those skills that they may have missed.
That's awesome. And excuse me. Sorry, go ahead.
Really quick. How many kids do you have? So you teach algebra, right?
Yeah. So I have 4 sections of algebra. In total, I think I have 60 kids.
Okay.
Among 4 classes. So my largest class is, I think, 17. My smallest is 12.
Yeah, I think the mastery approach is the most ideal, but I think it's hard to transition into what we already have set up as our public school system. So I think there just needs to be more awareness about it. And I think at the higher up levels, we need to have more of a discussion about what we're setting these kids up for. And I think that goes right along with, I don't know if you guys know this, but the Blue Ribbon Commission is trying to set up new pathways for graduation. So eventually there's going to be not just the Regents exams. They're trying to make it more inclusive, equity-based, and setting them up for those more personalized skills that we're seeing now in society to be more valuable than anything. So I think it takes time. I think it takes people out there like us who are challenging that what's there and what we're pushing for to make a better school system.
And like see that sounds great, but see like so I feel like I teach Regents geometry and I teach non-Regents geometry. Some of the kids who are in my non-Regents geometry should not be there. They should be in Regents geometry. However, the only reason they're not in Regents geometry is because they're lazy and they don't want to do the work in Regents geometry. So I love that. Sounds great. Blue ribbon like alternative to like different like graduation, whatever. I just hope that like that doesn't
get misused.
Give kids an option to A, give excuses, and to B, to not like push themselves and to challenge themselves and like not just.
I would agree.
Give them a way out. So like I mean I love that for like the kids who just don't get it and like who really aren't going anywhere, but like just like
aren't going the college bound route,
who are at that level, but like. I worry, like, especially some of the kids I teach, that's just going to enable them to, like, not put in any effort. Like,
I hear you.
Yeah, I would kind of agree with that argument because, like, if we're making it easier for them to graduate, like, are we really setting them up for the real world? You know, because I mean, they're in the real world. Things are not going to be made easy for us just because we find it challenging. I mean, like, I understand that, like. Obviously, students have learning disabilities that make it more difficult to maybe pass Regents exams than somebody else. But I feel like we can make exceptions for individual students because I feel like it's more of an individual need basis versus like a larger group that we're kind of making it seem like it is. Because I really think there is a big lack of motivation with a lot of students. Like there's so much potential that I see, especially in my lower level students. A lot of times, like if I ever have like parent meetings, because like a student is failing or whatnot, I always say to them, your child is so smart. They just do not put in the effort that they can. They're not putting forth their full potential. So I feel like giving them a route like that, that they're trying to come up with right now is just like, what are we doing? I don't personally agree with it.
It's hard because I am on both sides of it, and that's why I was like kind of doing this balance beam thing, because I see the benefits and I also have my disagreements, right? And I think that I'm hoping, I shouldn't say that I talk like I know for sure what they're doing with this, but I'm really hoping that they're not necessarily making it easier in the sense of not taking Regents exams. I'm hoping that we are replacing with skill-based knowledge. Yeah, like I'm hoping we do stuff. I really hope we do more with taxes and understanding budgets. And I think if there's any math that a kid needs to take in school, I think they need to take a business math. And I would love for business math to cover those types of things. I had business math last year for the first time teaching, and I made a copy of my W-2. I whited out my info, and I did it on the smartboard. I showed the kids. We couldn't do it all in one class period, so that was a struggle. But I showed my kids how to start taxes, what you're looking for. What is a W-2? What is that number that you fill in 0, 1, 2, 3? And it was awesome to see how engaged they were with something that is so practical to them, that's skill-based. So I'm really hoping if they do get rid of these Regents exams, that's the direction we're going. But who knows what they're actually thinking and doing and saying down in Albany.
And like, can I just like getting rid of Regents exams, like in a whole, I mean, we all know there's like a big debate about standardized testing and like, is it worth it? How, like, it doesn't do anything. And I know that, but like, I feel like a Regents or like, especially a Regents at the end of the year, I feel like a Regents can hold so many teachers, not only like students, yes, obviously, but I feel like also teachers just as much as kids, like hold them accountable. Like the amount of kids, like I have this one kid who literally hasn't shown up. He's maybe shown up like five times the entire year, and he says he doesn't want to show up because he'll pass the Regents, and my school that I work for is you pass the Regents, you pass the class kind of school. So he's not showing up at all, even because he has the Regents. Imagine how many kids like will do less than what they do. Even like and I say that same thing for the teachers. The amount of teachers who wouldn't teach anything if they didn't have that Regents at the end of the year to like prepare for whatever. Now, again, I have this kid who the last few days who's chosen to do absolutely nothing because all he says he needs is there's a motorcycle going by. Because he says all he needs for the rest of the year is a 20 in this marking period. So the past like today and like since Monday, he's chosen to do absolutely nothing in my class. But I feel like that Regents kind of threatens, like it gives like some standard for everybody. I don't know. I get the debate of standardized testing, and yes, it doesn't mean much. However, I just like it there to hold like a bar that you have to meet, like just like a minimum standard. I don't know.
Yeah, no, I hear you.
I like the Regents exams. I like the idea because, like you said, it does hold, people accountable. It kind of is like a checkpoint on like how much the student knows. But at the same time, I think that there needs to be some modifications, especially because like what we were talking about beforehand, like, how there's not enough time to get through the curriculum as is, like maybe modifying what standards we're teaching, maybe like cutting it down, maybe like, just spacing things out better. So that way it's like more realistic, because right now I feel like the expectations are too high, which is why so many people are like, oh my God, I hate the Regents exam. Standardized testing is so bad. Like, which I'm also not a fan of standardized testing, but I feel like this narrative has been pushed because of the unrealistic expectations that has been set by the state.
Agreed.
That's a really good point. Yeah, for sure. They need to change it. Maybe still keep it there, but like make it more like realistic and like with all of like the gaps like that have been happening. I feel like the state maybe doesn't realize it because they're not like in the classroom. They're not seeing it firsthand. But so adjusting it in a way to like set a realistic expectation for what is happening now in education.
Allison, you brought up the great point that pushes me to being the person I am and thinking about, what's next. There's a lot of people in Albany who's making choices about the education system who've never worked a day in the classroom. And that right there is where my heart and soul is. That's where I try to advocate and push. And, I think it's up to us, being the newbies of our math education in New York State. I think it takes the new fresh minds to take on these challenges that have been set up for us. They're the hurdles that we got to jump through, but I think we all can do it. It takes time, it takes a lot of thought, and it takes a lot of discussion like this to bounce ideas off of one another, because let's be real, we're all professionals in what we do. So, yeah, I think that's awesome.
And as teachers, we know that learning is important, and learning from each other is the easiest way to do that.
Absolutely. This jumps into my next topic of conversation, ways to incorporate math relevance in the classroom. So I was just talking to Sean right before we went live that yesterday I got to teach my 8th graders the Pythagorean theorem. A squared plus B squared equals C squared. And I love teaching the Pythagorean theorem because I've had a handful of people in the trades actually come up to me and be like, hey, I actually use that. And so now I take their stories and I go preach them to my middle school kids. Like, listen, these are people in my real life who've told me they use this almost on a daily basis. And it goes from construction to welding to electrician wiring a house, have all told me that they have used the Pythagorean theorem in one way or another. Besides something like this, real world trades, sharing stories, what are some ways that you guys try to incorporate math relevance in the classroom to make sense to our kids, show them why it's important, where they might use this? Because I think we all come across the kids that say, when am I ever gonna use this? And you got to be prepared for that question. If not, they're gonna eat you alive.
So that's a question that my students love to ask me because they love to try to get me off topic and get out of doing their work. So I always bring it to a conversation about like, what they want to do in the future. And, we talk about how like literally any type of STEM field that you go into, whether it be nursing, engineering, like environmental science, anything that you go into that's STEM related, you're going to use math, I tell them that like there may be something that you learn in algebra that you may never use in real life ever again. And that's totally fine, but there are a lot of things in algebra that like the problem solving skills that you learn within algebra that you can carry with you for the rest of your life into whatever career that you do, and there are a lot of aspects of algebra, in particular, data and statistics that really do play like a big important role in many different careers, whether it be like analytics, if your students like sports, any sporting statistics, so I always try to make a connection to them and what they think and like what they're thinking about like doing in the future, because I want them to see that connection to themselves, not just like, like for example, the Pythagorean theorem questions that are just like, oh, there's a hot air balloon over here. There's a like the viewing point from over here, find the distance, something like that. Like students are not ever going to use that exact scenario in real life. So like, yes, that might be like a real world problem. Is it really though? Because like, are you really going to be finding that? I mean, some people might, but
Right.
the average person is not going to be doing that exact problem.
Right.
So just trying to make that connection back to their interests and what they think that they might want to do after high school really helps me kind of diverge from that question of when am I ever going to use this?
Yeah. You got an answer for that, Allison?
Honestly, no. This is something that is hard for me to do. I feel like is to kind of incorporate those real life scenarios. And like when a kid asks me like, when am I ever going to use this? I'm pretty honest with them. I'm like, you're probably not. Like, I mean, proofs, like there's 0.5%, there's like a 0.5% of people in this world who use proofs and daily. And I only use it because it's my job. I teach it. But I kind of like wanted like it's not like what you're learning, it's like the
how you're learning it.
Learn it and how to learn it, the problem solving, the critical thinking, all of that, like this, like the muscles you use to like learn math, like that is what you're growing and like that's what you're building, like the problem solving skills, like and like I don't know, like pushing through a challenging problem, like how like to like persevere. I don't know. So I do struggle. I mean, there's some things that I truly believe that that is not meant. There is no way. I mean, there's probably a way, but there are some things that cannot be brought back to a normal person's life. Like, how do you make proofs relevant? Like, you can't do that. Unfortunately, we just have to teach it. There are times, yes, where you can bring in real life, but I do struggle with that. And like, this is what this is. This is kind of, unfortunately, this is what the state tells us we have to do. I have to teach you, but I do kind of bring it back to like, the problem solving, the critical thinking, like all of that, like the mindset, the skills, like you build in your brain, like that's why this is important. So
Yeah,
Allison,
absolutely.
I'm gonna disagree with you, and I don't want you to take offense to this at all, because I'm actually kind of jealous that you teach geometry, because I really, that was my favorite thing to teach last year was geometry, because of the fact that I was able to make so many connections with the real world with students. So I feel like once I had the same mindset about proofs until one of my colleagues last year, who had been teaching geometry since for 20 plus years, she told me, she's like, I think the way to connect, proofs, for example, with students who primarily are their strengths are English and history. You make it seem like they're almost like writing an argumentative essay, or they're trying to they're trying to present an issue to somebody, and they're trying to get to that end point. So I think I feel like there's ways to connect something like proofs that's not necessarily anything to do with math, but to maybe something else that's completely unrelated.
Like a kind of related skill, in a different, I actually know, I like that, because I don't know, because okay, so when in geometry, as you know, you can't assume things, and I tell my kids,
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, I quite bluntly tell them, don't make shit up. And so, and what did they do? They make shit up. But no, that's a really good way to put it. You're not how to explain what a proof is, because what is a proof? I don't know. It's of reasons and statements. But no, you're kind of, I like how you say that, you're making an argument for something, and relate it back to social studies. And social studies, you have debates, you have an argument, so you're trying to come up with your evidence and your reasons why supporting it. You're not, so I don't know, I like that. But yeah, I like that. But I do realize in geometry, the shapes and polygons, I'm not saying there's nothing in geometry that can be made into real life. I'm not saying that. I find it hard to do for myself, when teachers, my high school teacher who I did my student teaching with, she is the queen of coming up with metaphors and somehow making it make sense, graph shifts, how x's don't make sense, when you shift a quadratic, it's x minus 4 and you're really going to the right. Somehow she made up this weird explanation, weird thing, and to this day, 10 years later, is still stuck in my brain. I can word for word tell you what her lesson was, and how she explained all that, and how she got us to connect with it. So that is a skill that I feel I struggle with. Obviously, eventually, the more I teach, the better I'll get at it. But it's just for me, connect. I think it's probably more of a personal thing that I struggle with. But I want to use that shot. So thank you.
Of course.
See, listening to you guys talk about the proofs aspect, my brain shifted to my middle school vocab of read the receipts, So I'm thinking of the kids who, they want, when they are on their phones and stuff, they will be those FBI agents. Well, this said this at this time. This said this at, they put these master plans together. So it's you got to do the same. And a proof, you're just not doing it with the same information.
Yeah.
And I don't know, I just thought that was so funny, because that's something my kids would say. They come up with some wacky stuff.
And I'm we were doing transformation. We're doing similarity transformations, given two triangles, write a sequence, and they can do it in the coordinate plane. But when it's out in space, they had a problem out in just have two triangles not in a coordinate plane. And they were the y-axis, and I'm show me where the y-axis is in this problem. I'm like, show it to me. I'm like, you can't because it's not there. This is not totally different, like totally think like, so yes, but yeah, no, yeah.
I think also not only showing them the real world application or the problem solving, critical thinking that we push for them. I think also relevance also means why do we got to learn in general? And so this goes to where I'm trying to tell my kids, my kids are anywhere from 11 to 14. And I straight up tell them, you don't know what you want to be when you grow up. You might think you do, but your mind might change for the next 5 times before you actually graduate school. And so I tell them, I want you to learn for more opportunity, not necessarily to learn to know it. The more you know, the more you go, the more you grow. I feel like Dr. Seuss over here right now. But I tell them, my summer school kids, those are a rough bunch. Not gonna lie. Those are all the ones that don't want to be there, who they don't want to learn, all of that. So I tell them, one day I had 3 girls and 1 boy in this one section of summer school. And I was like, okay, let's talk about history. And I said, us women, we did not used to have the right to vote. We couldn't work. We couldn't do all of this stuff. And I said, we couldn't even go to school. But we fought for the right of education to have equal opportunity as men did. And I go, why do you think we fought for that? And they had no response. And I said, because the more you know, the more opportunity you have for a better life, for better anything. So I think relevance is so much bigger than just making it a real world scenario.
There's an analogy that I give my students that it definitely makes them think. I try to connect learning with going to the gym, right? So thinking about your brain as a muscle group, this is how you train your brain, So in order to get through life, obviously you need to work your brain, and at some times in life, your brain is going to get tired, but the way to train that is to is to constantly be learning, so that way when you're not in a state of learning, your brain is at maximum capacity or whatever, just like it would be at the gym. If you go to the gym for months after months after months, just training your legs, they're going to be really, really strong months down the road, so your brain is the same thing. It's just a muscle group that you have to train with learning.
That's a great point.
I always tell my kid, I may not say it always, but there'll be an occasional kid that would be like, oh, I don't want to do all these practice problems, or why do we have to do all these problems? And I'm like, listen, you don't quit practice before a big game, do you? You go to what do you? You're not gonna, or I don't want to do my homework. Well, you go to practice before a game, don't you? And they're like, yeah. I don't okay, so you need to do your homework before a test. So that's the same thing.
Sometimes I say I can give you the test right now, and they're like no. I said, okay, so then we need to practice.
Right. This brings up, I found this YouTube video, I think somewhere along the way, and I show every single one of my classes early on in the year, and I actually made them rewatch it about midway through the year, because it talks about how the knowledge you have is I don't know how to describe this right now on the spot, but I am going to definitely find it somewhere and put it on one of these links in my live streams, because it's so worth taking a look at, and the way that they describe things is so easy for youngers to understand. But we're getting close on time, that I don't want to go over time because I know we all have busy lives. The last thing I had to talk about is technology used or encouraged. Is there any technology that you guys use in the classroom currently, or any technology that you wish that you had. And I'm bringing it back to tech because that's where I'm getting my master's in right now. So I always want to talk about that. And so do you guys have any technology you use in the classroom or you would love to use?
So something that me and my other geometry teacher, we started doing about this time last year was we started flipping the classroom. So the kids watch the lessons outside of class, and we do like the homework inside of class. And so the beginning of the year when we started doing it, we didn't go into it right away. We probably started flipping the classroom about our middle of October. And so I upload my lessons to Edpuzzle. And that way I can like kind of track, I stalk them. I full on stalk them. I can see when they watch it, how long they've spent on it. Like I import questions. Like, I mean, you guys probably know what Edpuzzle is. So that's the biggest technology I use. I don't use a ton of technology and math. I don't know. I am a traditionalist. I like my pen and paper for math. So that's what I make my students do. I don't know. I just don't utilize technology as much. But like the Edpuzzle thing, the flipping the classroom for my geometry, because that's about as much technology as I get for my classroom.
What about you, Sean?
Well, I definitely use like programs that just like Google Slides, Jamboard, just like general presentations, just allow create activities for my students. And they do all of that on their Chromebooks. That's probably like the most like basic use of technology that I do. One thing that I personally use in my classroom that I think has made a big impact on my students is I use an iPad to do all of my notes, and I have it screen shared up to my smartboard. So that way I'm not just like standing at the board, doing all of the problems, or standing off to the side, like underneath the document camera, because that's what I was doing. Actually, I started off the year, like the way that my classroom is set up, like my main computer is like way off on the side of the classroom where my smartboard is here. So like if all my students are here, but I'm way over here, at my desk, like that's where my document camera was attached to. I wasn't interacting with my students at all. And like it did a disservice to them. I felt like I was wasting my time because like I knew that they weren't paying attention, but I had no way to get them to pay attention while I'm teaching. So like I pushed to get a new smartboard in my room so that way I could screen share on my iPad, because I had an older smartboard that still had like the Velcro cloth as like the front screen or whatever, and then like the board in the back of it. But now I have like a genuine like smartboard computer that has a screen share feature. So that's something that I really like, because I'm able to walk around all the time and constantly be interacting with my students. If I see that somebody has their head down, I can keep teaching and subtly go over, just tap their desk. It's made my classroom run so much smoother. I would like to see districts, my district doesn't like Apple. They kind of don't like that I use my iPad. So, but I kind of wish that the kids had access to an iPad, because the Chromebooks don't work very well at all. Like they're very slow. Like these kids still have the same Chromebooks that were new when I was in high school, and I'm like these are running way too slow for what I want to do. So there's programs like Lumio that I don't know if you guys have ever used Lumio, but it's basically it's kind of like Cami in a way that like you edit documents within the like the software, but you can like as a teacher you can assign like a document to certain students in your class. So you can like dish out a document to have like 4 or 5 students all work on at the same time. But my issue with that is like, because they have the Chromebooks don't work very well. So if they're all trying to like write on the document, like using their stylus, if their hand is on the screen, it messes up the writing. But if they write like this, it's really messy and just like they hate it. I would hate it too. Like I want my stuff to look neat, Yeah. But like I don't have that issue with the iPad. So that's where I wish that like, the students had a little bit better technology, so that way I could do a little bit more of those interactive things that I'm but that's pretty much all I use for technology in my room.
I do the doc cam because like my handwriting on technology, I'll be honest, is terrible, and I feel like writing on paper. I am a true traditionalist. I like my paper, and like because of the proofs and the diagrams, in the space, like I said, my handwriting on technology is atrocious. So for me, but yes, actually, I've seen that the iPad thing done, and it's a fantastic idea.
Yeah, and it's great because I use OneNote to kind of store all of my each of my classes like notes and whatnot for the year. So it's like into our classroom.
Do you want to say that again, Sean? You froze for like 2 seconds.
Oh yeah. I share like a live link to the notebook in Google Classroom, so that way after every single class, or even like while I'm teaching in class, they can go into the Google Classroom and they can just like watch it. You know,
that's
so like
awesome.
I had a student one day who forgot her glasses and she sits in the very, very back, but every single seat in the front row was taken. And I was like, you have your Chromebook? And she's like, yeah. And I'm like, okay, great. Pull this up and just like watch me do it. So she had her computer screen right in front of her and she was just able to take notes.
That's awesome.
It's great because also IEPs and 504s, some students need a copy of the notes like as a part of their accommodations. So doing this completely alleviates that level of stress for me.
That's awesome because I took a sick day today because you kind of can't tell right now. I'm on so much cold medicine, but I took a sick day and I have to make my kids watch an eMath video, which I thank eMath for being a great resource, but it's not something that I love to just replace myself with.
Yeah.
So that's awesome that you can record that also. And for anyone that's sick, you put that on Google Classroom. That's no excuse of why you don't have the notes, why you didn't have anything ready for the next day. So that's awesome. I actually wrote that down for me to look into.
Yeah, and it's something that I constantly remind my students, like, especially when they're absent, they're like, oh, I wasn't here last class, so I have no idea what you did. And I'm like, okay, you know where the class, but I was like, it's always been there since the beginning of the year. You know, like this is where the notes always are stored. So if you know that we have class that day, it's your responsibility to go back in and take the notes that way you're ready for the next class. And if you don't do that, like I'm sorry, like I can't do it for you. You know, right. So it really does put the ball in their court, and it forces them to be responsible and be accountable for their classes.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't use much technology in my classroom either. I feel as math people, it is very hard to do for sure. There's a ton of things I would love to use, but at the end it comes down to what does your school have? What are you accessible with? And all of that. As a new person to the school, I say new, 2 years I've been there. I'm still advocating for a lot of newer technologies for our kids to use. So our IT person at my school, him and I are like best buds, and I am actually getting a grant for our school to get some headsets so we can do some more VR in the room. I've even started the conversation about starting an esports team at my school, and we're looking into that. Allison, I'm sure you're laughing because you're like, girl, you do enough already.
Well, yes, you need to like take care of yourself. But no, like because look, I wouldn't have thought of that to bring that in high school, but sure, I love that because I feel like I've seen it in colleges. Like colleges will say like sports and like thing, but like I wouldn't have thought of that for a high school. But no, like that's awesome.
It's so Sean and I being in these tech classes together, we see so much about that. We talk so much about that. So for me, I get kind of nerdy when I'm like, oh, I'm going to apply this at my school. And my other class that I'm in that I'm not in the same class as Sean is a video and design production class. And I actually have made, so we have to upload our videos to YouTube. So I do have a YouTube channel if you want to go follow. But I create these videos and then I make my kids watch them for homework. And I make them take notes and I will grade them on how good their notes are based on the video. And I'm like, listen, I know what's in that video because I made that video. You can't fool me. So I know what I said and I know what I didn't say. So it was so funny because you guys are going to get a kick out of this too. I did an exponent rules one. So, you know, you got the product rule, the quotient rule, adding exponents, subtracting exponents. I had a kid go tell me the product rule and tried to tell me it was the product rule we learned in calculus about derivatives and all of that. And I go, boy, I know this is, you cannot just tell me what this means. So don't even try me when you Googled that stuff. He goes, why? That's what it said. I go, that's above your pay grade. And that's what I tell him when we're above what they're learning. I go, that's above your pay grade. You don't know that. And it's so funny to be able to see that. So I'm using a lot of what I do in my grad classes in my classroom, which is a lot of fun for me because it brings relevance to me in what I'm doing every day.
I'm taking the research techniques class right now. So any sort of data collecting that we have to do. So we did like a qualitative, we did a quantitative research topic. I've always been connecting it back to my classroom, and it's been like a really great way for me to like reflect on what I do. And then also our tech class that we're in together, you know, just like thinking about, you know, like when we made that virtual reality exhibit, I'm like, oh my God, like imagine 10 years from now, our classrooms are all full of virtual VR headsets. And we just like have like a plethora of exhibits for like each lesson that we can do. And just like think of how interactive and cool and engaging that could be in the future.
Yeah.
You know?
Or even, I get so nerded out when we start bringing about in our classrooms. But Sean, we had a guest speaker who talked about augmented reality, right? And they did a 360 picture of like this scene, and they talked about the history of certain aspects of the scene. And in my head, I went crazy over this because I was like, could you not take a 360 picture of, let's say, a construction site? And if you went all the way around, you can see the different maths that each person's using or a problem that each person has to solve. So I think there's just so many ways that this can go. It's so new. The money needs to be invested. Time.
Yeah, I mean, just like the one exhibit that we made, you know, took hours, you know, and I'm like, just like thinking about that for like every single lesson, like you'd have to get like, you know, a team of teachers to be like, okay, like this is how you use this. Let's go. Like, we're going to make a whole thing for this.
Yeah, it's hard. But we hit our over-hour mark. I won't keep you guys any later because we are very busy bees and it's a school day for most of us. Sean on spring break.
I'm on spring break. I'm going to enjoy my last couple hours in Florida before I come back to the dreary weather.
Just let you know, it was snowing here yesterday.
Yeah.
It was.
Keep it in Potsdam.
But do you guys have any closing remarks you'd like to say before we log off? Anything to our viewers? Anything to us? We do have a couple viewers still on.
I don't know. For me, honestly, I find it like Stevie, we went to like the PLC thing in March, and you know, we can all sit here and say like, you know, professional development is stupid, but honestly, I feel like I've appreciated having conversations with other teachers so much more because I feel like I think going to that made me realize how lucky I am to be in a bigger district and to have more teachers in my department. Whereas like, I mean, you at your school, you are a 2-person department. Whereas like I have we are a total of 5 when we have 2 open math positions total. There could possibly be 7 of us. And for me to be working with like my other geometry teacher who I am like beyond close with now, like, and she's been teaching longer than I've been alive. So like having those other people to like learn from, I feel like has truly, like, I have truly appreciated it so much more in high school, college. Hated group projects, hated working with people, but it's so different now. And I feel like, I mean, having this like conversation for the past hour, like, honestly has helped me strong. Like how you think of like how like the teacher told you like how to think of like proofs and stuff like that. Like I would have never like really come up with that. So like this conversation only happened because, you know, Stevie, your assignment. Nonetheless, I'm still walking away from this conversation with something that I can use. Mm-hmm. So like, I don't know.
I think that just goes to say that we're always learning. We might be professionals in our field, but none of us are perfect in our own ways. And it's always going to be us bouncing off of each other. And I'm thankful enough to make great friends through college who are still willing to show up and have these conversations together, because in the end, we might have only been together 3-4 years, but we understand who each other are, and we care enough about each other that we want to help. And I think that's more than a lot of people have to say. So I want to thank you guys for being a part of our journey together and hopefully continuing.
Yeah, no, it's really great that we're able to still connect years later after college and still bounce all these ideas off of each other and just like still learn and grow with each other. And, you know, I look forward to continuing to do that late years down the road.
Yes. I know right before you joined, Allison, Sean and I were talking about us 3 having our first class together, I think was Brower's technology class. And we're talking about how that's going on 5 years ago.
Was it? Oh my God, was it 5 years ago?
We've been teaching for 2, so it's getting there. It's crazy.
Well, my Snapchat story is my high school senior year popped up for my senior year, and I'm just like, that was 7 years ago.
It's crazy.
Well, for 7 years.
Yep.
It's wild. But thank you for joining us today. Thank you, everyone, to our viewers joining in. We had some people popping in and out throughout the time. I appreciate it. That's it for our new math teachers debrief. So I will let you guys go and just thank you for your time.
All right. Thank you.
Bye, guys.
Bye.